Sit closer, friend. The fire burns low tonight, and what I am about to tell you, well, let's just say this story has been locked away in the vaults of Norse history for over 1,000 years. My grandfather told me this before he died, and he made me swear on the blood of Odin that I would never speak of it until I was old enough to understand its true weight. Today, that time has come. The year was 982 AD. The world believed that the known seas had already been conquered, that every Norse explorer had mapped every possibility, every danger, every treasure. But they were wrong. Terribly, desperately wrong. My ancestor was a man named Erik Bloodsail, not the famous Erik the Red who discovered Greenland, but a different Erik altogether. A man so secretive, so careful with his words that history itself forgot him, and that was entirely intentional. Erik Bloodsail was not like other Viking explorers. While Leif Erikson and his brothers sought fame and glory, Erik sought something far more dangerous, the truth. You see, among the North, there existed an ancient prophecy, one so powerful and so forbidden that speaking it aloud could get you executed for heresy. It was called the Prophecy of the Twilight Lands, and it spoke of a place beyond the northern horizon where the very laws of nature bent differently, where mountains floated in the sky, where the ocean itself glowed at night, where an ancient power slept, a power that, if awakened, could either save mankind or destroy it forever. The Norse Council of Elders had decreed that this prophecy must never be pursued. The risk, they said, was too great, the unknown too vast. But Erik Bloodsail had other plans. He pulled out a piece of weathered parchment, so old it nearly crumbled at the touch. On it was a map, not like any map the Norse had ever made. It showed coastlines that curved in impossible directions. It showed landmarks that seemed to defy geography. And there, in the center, marked with a symbol that looked like a sleeping eye, was a location labeled in an ancient script, Svartheim, the dark home. "This place exists," Erik continued, "and I will find it. But I cannot do this alone. I need men brave enough to face the unknown, men willing to sail beyond the edge of the world itself, and most importantly, men willing to keep this secret forever, even unto death." One by one, his men stepped forward and swore the blood oath. They would sail with Erik to the ends of the earth if necessary. They would find the Twilight Lands, and they would return with proof of what lay beyond the horizon. I remember the night like it was yesterday, even though I'm telling you this centuries later through the haze of memory and the ancient texts my family guarded. Erik met in secret with a select group of men, 12 in total, the most trusted warriors and sailors he knew. They gathered in a hidden cove far from the prying eyes of the council. The cave was lit only by torches, and the shadows danced like living things across the stone walls. Erik stood before them, his scarred face illuminated by the flickering light, and he spoke words that would change everything. "The council wants us to believe the Twilight Lands are a myth," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I have found proof, ancient maps, writings from explorers who came before us, men whose names were erased from history because they dared to seek what the council forbids." They left on a night when the northern lights danced across the sky, a sign, they believed, of the gods' approval. Their ship, the Odin's Whisper, was specially prepared. It was smaller than the great dragon ships, but faster, more maneuverable, built with a hull reinforced with iron bands and sails woven from the wool of white wolves. Some say those sails could catch winds that other ships couldn't even detect. For weeks, they sailed north, farther north than any Viking had ever dared to venture. The temperatures dropped so low that the water began to freeze around their ship. Icebergs, massive and white like the teeth of some sleeping giant, drifted past them in the darkness.
Some of the men began to lose their minds from the isolation and the cold.
But then, and this is where the story takes a turn that makes the hair on your arm stand on end, they crossed the threshold. There was no visible marker, no line in the water, but suddenly the temperature changed. The cold didn't disappear exactly, but it transformed into something else, something that felt alive. The water beneath them began to glow with a faint blue luminescence, not the reflection of moonlight or stars, but something emanating from the depths themselves. And then they heard it, a sound like nothing on earth, a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the very bones of the ship. One of Erik's men, a warrior named Bjorn, claimed later that it felt like the planet itself was singing a song that had been waiting to be heard for thousands of years. Erik ordered the men to remain calm. He had been expecting something like this. According to the ancient writings he'd studied, the Twilight Lands existed in a space between the mortal world and the realm of the gods. Crossing the threshold was always marked by signs of the supernatural. As they sailed deeper, the water around them became more luminescent. Schools of fish, if you could even call them that, swam alongside the ship. But these weren't ordinary fish. They were translucent, glowing from within, their bodies seeming to phase in and out of visibility. When one of the men tried to catch one with a net, the creature simply vanished, as if it had never been there at all.
Days passed, or perhaps it was weeks. Time felt different in that place. The sun didn't rise and set like it did in the normal world. Instead, the sky shifted through shades of purple, green, and deep blue, as if the world itself was caught in an eternal twilight. On what they believed was the seventh day, though they could never be quite certain, they saw land. It rose from the ocean like a dream materializing into reality. Mountains, impossibly tall and crowned with floating stone islands that defied all logic. Crystal spires jutted from the earth, refracting the strange light into rainbows that had colors no man had ever seen before. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time.
Erik led a small team ashore. The beach was covered not with sand, but with what appeared to be fragments of star metal, smooth, cold, and humming with that same mysterious frequency they'd heard in the water. As they ventured inland, following a path that seemed to be carved deliberately into the rock, they came upon the ruins. These were structures that had existed for millennia, temples perhaps, or monuments to some forgotten civilization. The architecture was unlike anything in the Norse tradition, or any tradition Erik had ever encountered. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when you looked at them directly, revealing different meanings depending on the angle of your gaze. But the most astonishing discovery came when they reached the center of the ruins. There, carved into the living rock of the mountain itself, was an image, a figure of immense size, carved with such precision and detail that it seemed almost alive. It depicted a being, humanoid but not quite human. The face was serene, as if caught in eternal sleep, and on its chest, in a place where a heart would be, was a symbol, the same symbol that had marked the location on Erik's ancient map, the Sleeping One. The prophecy hadn't been metaphorical. There was indeed something or someone sleeping in this place. And according to the texts Erik had studied, this being had been sleeping for so long that the world had forgotten it existed. The civilizations that built these temples had vanished into dust, but the sleeper remained, patient, waiting for something only it understood.
One of Erik's men wanted to wake it. He was mad with the strangeness of the place, and he began to chant words in Old Norse, trying to summon the power of the gods. Erik had to physically restrain him, and eventually they had to tie him to a stone while his screams echoed through the ruins. That's when they heard it, a sound like the world itself was stirring, a low rumble that started deep beneath their feet and traveled up through their bodies. The ground began to shake. The floating islands in the sky started to descend. They ran.
They barely made it back to the ship. As they pushed off from shore, the very fabric of that strange world seemed to be tearing apart. The luminescent water became violent, churning with forces they couldn't comprehend. The sky split with cracks of light, as if reality itself was fracturing. Erik made a decision in that moment, a decision that would define the rest of his life and haunt his descendants for generations. He destroyed the map. He ordered every record of their journey burned. He swore his men to absolute secrecy under pain of death, and he made a pact with them. They would take this secret to their graves. Some say Erik did this out of fear of what the council would do if they learned he had violated their sacred laws, fear of what might happen if the rest of the world learned about the Twilight Lands and tried to wake the sleeping one. But others, and this is what I believe, based on the writings my family kept hidden, Erik did this out of compassion, out of a desperate need to protect something precious. Because in that moment, as their ship crossed back through the threshold between worlds, Erik understood something profound. The Twilight Lands and the being that slept there was not meant for human discovery. It was a sanctuary, a place where ancient forces could rest undisturbed and in their sleep maintain a delicate balance that kept the world stable. If humanity knew the truth, if we knew what lay beyond the horizon, we would be unable to resist the temptation to exploit it, to plunder it, to wake the sleeping one and demand it serve our purposes, and that would be catastrophic. Erik lived the rest of his life in silence. He took a wife, had children, and became a respected figure in Norse society, but always with that secret burning in his chest. His descendants were chosen carefully. Only one in each generation was told the truth. Only one was shown the hidden texts and the fragments of evidence that remained. Until now, until I tell you. You might be wondering why I would break a 1,000-year-old oath of silence, why I would risk the wrath of those who have guarded this secret for generations. The answer is simple. The world has changed. The internet, the technology you possess, the global communication networks, they have made it impossible to keep secrets anymore. Everything eventually comes to light. And more importantly, I believe the time has come for humanity to know. Not to exploit, but to understand, to respect. To know that beyond our maps and charts, beyond our understanding of what's possible, there exists something greater than ourselves. Something that was ancient when we were young, and will be ancient still when we are dust. The Twilight Lands are real. The Sleeping One exists. And perhaps, if we're wise enough to listen to Erik Bloodsail's final lesson, we'll understand that some mysteries are meant to remain mysterious. Some powers are meant to remain dormant, and some horizons are not meant to be crossed, not out of fear, but out of respect for forces we cannot fully comprehend. But there's one more thing, something that Erik wrote in his final days, in a journal that only my family has ever read. It's a passage that chills me every time I read it, and it's the real reason I'm sharing this story with you today. He wrote, "The Sleeping One is not asleep by choice. It sleeps because we, the world, keep it asleep. The moment we forget it exists, the moment we no longer acknowledge its presence in the Twilight Lands, it will stir, it will awaken, and then neither gods nor men will be able to contain what comes next." And then, in the margins of that same page, in writing so small it almost seems to whisper across the centuries, unless, of course, it has already begun to wake. So there you have it, friends, the secret mission of a Viking explorer who ventured beyond the horizon and discovered something that changed him forever. A man who chose silence over glory, a man who understood that true power lies not in conquest,
but in knowledge and in knowing when that knowledge should remain hidden. The question now is, what will you do with this story? Will you dismiss it as myth, as legend? Or will you begin to wonder about all those unexplained phenomena, those strange occurrences in the far north that science can't quite explain? The lights that dance in ways they shouldn't, the sounds that carry across impossible distances, the feeling when you look at certain places on the map that something ancient and powerful is watching you back. The choice is yours, my friends, but remember, Erik Bloodsail crossed the threshold between worlds, and he returned, forever changed. Sometimes the greatest journeys are the ones we never take. Sometimes the greatest discoveries are the ones we choose to leave undiscovered, because some horizons, my friends, are forbidden for a reason. What are your thoughts? Did you know about Erik Bloodsail's secret mission before today? Have you ever experienced something in the far north that science couldn't explain? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this tale from the sagas, don't forget to subscribe to Vikings POV Stories for more untold legends, secret histories, and forbidden knowledge from the age of exploration. See you in the next adventure, warriors. This is your storyteller, signing off from the Northern Realms.